This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, I get Erev Shabbos Rabbi. I want to share with you the obvious connection between Vladmir Putin and Shabbos Chazon, which is obviously on everybody's mind. What does Putin got to do with Shabbos Chazon? Well, it's very interesting that Putin has a long history of being close to the Jewish people. Now, in terms of the history of the Russian government has not usually been an ally of the Jewish people. Nebuch, how many Jews were led astray, forgot about Judaism and forgot about God under Russian rule, from the Tsar to communism. But, very interesting, Vladimir Putin has been a very powerful exception, and Jewish people have played a very significant role in his personal history. So the question is, why is that? In fact, he was at an event. He was holding Rabbi Lazar's hand, like he was holding it like this, and the KGB comes in. No, you don't do that. And he said, So what is this unusual relationship that he has with Jewish people? You'll see where I'm getting at. Well, actually, Rabbi Beryl Lazar, who's referred to as Putin's rabbi, some job, he told the story about Putin that Putin had told him. And that is, Putin grew up as a young child in a very poor communist family. His parents were barely home. They were very poor. They were working, mamish yomim v'layla, on behalf of communism. And he lived next door, and they sort of shared a tenement with a wall that didn't even go all the way up, with a Hasidic family, a Chabad family. And he would come home from school, and he would be hungry. And the mama of the Yiddish family would call him in and say, "You want something to eat?" She would feed him. In fact, he would always hang out in the house. And he would see how the father made Kiddush Friday night, how the father would be learning Gemara the whole day on Shabbos. And he would ask, what are you learning? What's so interesting? And the father would say, "This is our Talmud, this is our tradition." And he developed a very strong interest in Judaism and Jewish studies. And in 2005, Putin made an official visit to Israel. He even visited his high school teacher, Mina Yuditskaya Berliner, who lived in Tel Aviv, and he wasn't pleased with the conditions that she was living in. And he actually bought her a brand new apartment, and he didn't want her to have to move. So he took care of all the expenses and all the refurbishing until this high school teacher of his, who he said made a very big impact on him, she was able to upgrade her condition. So Putin has a long-standing history. By the way, this family, this Hasidic family who he grew up with, the name was Anatoly Raklin, who not only was a Hasidic Yid, he was also Putin's high school wrestling coach. Okay. Not sure how all these details come together, but, it's not a stira. It's not a stira. So, anyway, because of the gratitude he felt for that family, when Putin was the deputy mayor of the city of Leningrad, he was the one who granted official permission to open the first Jewish school in Leningrad. And I met with somebody this week who's a Rosh Yeshiva in Israel, of a modern Orthodox school in Israel, who is involved in a certain organization in Russia called Shvut Ami, and he visited there recently, and he said what's happening today in Moscow is unbelievable. The koilelim, the yeshivas, the tarbatzas haTorah, the buildings that are being built, Torah institutions that you don't even have in America. And this would never have happened 20 years ago. And it's an interesting twist in history how this guy Putin, whether you like him or not, it's actually Russia's the only place in the world now where Putin actually obeys the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, and that is he does not tolerate deviance, but that's a story for another time. In fact, this Rosh Yeshiva told me that if you're not living in the United States of America, if you're not living in Eretz Yisrael, the only place you're allowed to live in the world is Russia. That's what he says. He says he doesn't understand how people, if they're not living in Eretz Yisrael, the only place they could live is Russia, because at least they don't condone Tayeva. But in any event, I'm not sure we're going to leave this one on. But in any event, it's interesting. So Putin comes and he visits the Western Wall. And he wanted to be taken to the Western Wall tunnels. And it was reported in the news that Putin had a chat at the Kaisel Hamaravi. So I'll read to you what I have over here. Russian President Vladimir Putin paid a visit to the Kaisel, to the Kotel in Jerusalem Tuesday night. This was June 26, 2012, with an entourage of Israeli and Russian security personnel. Okay, he's accompanied by Russia's chief rabbi, Beryl Lazar, and a colleague, Rabbi Alexander Barada, of the Federation of Jewish Communities of Russia. Fine. So Putin offers a prayer and recited Tehillim. And despite the late hour, there were bystanders around, and one of them calls out in Russian, "Welcome, President Putin." Putin smiles. I mean, typically, if you call out to a president or to any official, okay, maybe you're lucky if they acknowledge you. On his way out from the Kotel tunnels, Putin broke away from his entourage, from his security circle, and he actually approaches the man, which is like, a major violation of protocol, to leave your security. And he recognizes that this man is a former citizen of the former Soviet Union, and Putin, who's a former KGB officer, has a chat with this frum gentleman. And the guy tells him how much he loves living in Israel and how vital the Western Wall is to Jewish people and how it was built by Shlomo HaMelech. And Putin says, that's why I came here. I came to pray for the rebuilding of the Third Temple. Wow. 2012. Okay, so what's this got to do with anything? This has a lot to do with the 3 weeks and Tisha B'Av. Why is that? Because the pasuk says in Eicha, Kol roidfeha hisiguha bein hamatzarim, that anyone who tried to pursue Klal Yisrael caught up with us during the 3 weeks. In other words, the 3 weeks literally has been a lightning rod of tragedy. Anyone who tried to get us, they've been successful during the 3 weeks. But the Sifrei Chasidus say, the Magid said, Reb Tzadok HaKohen quotes the Magid, Kol roidef ka hisiguha bein hamatzarim. Anyone who pursues God, he's available. You could get him. You could have audience with him during the 3 weeks. Why? So the mashal they give is like this. And this is really, the story with Putin made me think of this. The mashal is that when the king's in his palace, you're not going to get audience with the king. There's a protocol. There's a certain way of doing things. If you're a regular peasant, you ain't getting audience with the king. Maybe you could scream out from afar. You're lucky if the king lifts up his eyes and even acknowledges you. But when the king is in the village and he's not at home, then things don't always work like protocol. And sometimes, the king's on vacation or the king's not at home, he's not exactly always following the protocol of the palace. So when the king is in the village, that's your opportunity to run over to him and say, King, help me out. Look where I live. I need this and this. And sometimes the king is saying, you know what, you got me at the right time. I'm not bound by the rules of the palace pomp and ceremony. Well, says the Maggid of Mezrich, during the 3 weeks, Kiviyachal, the home of the Rebbeinu Shalom is destroyed. He's not in his house. Melech Besada, the king's out in the field. And in a way, he's more accessible than he is during the rest of the year. Machusa d'shmaya ke'en machusa da'ara. You ain't getting audience with Putin, but somehow when he's sort of off guard, not in his, he's not in the Kremlin, and you catch him at the Western Wall, you might have an opportunity you wouldn't normally have. That's what the Maggid is saying. That during the 3 weeks, Rebbeinu Shalom is not in his regular palace, and it's an opportunity to have audience with him when the Rebbeinu Shalom is not home. So I'll end off with one thought from Reb Pinchas Karitzer, and I want to thank my friend Gedalia Schwartz for sending this to me. And that is, Reb Pinchas Karitzer writes in Ois Shin Pei Aleph that if a person needs something, person's lacking something, Eis toivhu lehispalel ulevakesh me'Hashem Yisbarach hazeh b'Tisha B'Av be'eis sheyoshvin al haaretz. A time which is mesugal to be mispalel for what one needs is on Tisha B'Av when you're sitting on the floor. Why then? Maybe it's because you have a different type of audience with Rebbeinu Shalom. He's not in his palace. He's not in his home. He's Melech Basada. The Rebbeinu Shalom is out of his comfort level, so to speak. and He's imanu anoichi b'tzar. The Rebbeinu Shalom is with us in our tzar. So we should talk about zoicha that this Tisha B'av, as we sit on the floor, we have a very interesting minhag that as we sit on the floor, immediately at 12 o'clock at Chatzos, we get up. You can't even give it a full day. You have 3 weeks of avelos, no haircuts, 9 days, you're not washing. It's Shvur Shechal by Tisha B'av. Erev Tisha B'av, it's Meisai Muta Lefanav. It's like it's a level of aninos. And here it is, the night of Tisha B'av. It's the most intense avelos of the year. And that's it. How anticlimactic. You give it a couple hours in the morning, and then you get up immediately. That's the answer. As soon as the nun comes of Nefilah, Shabbos, comes the Samach, and the Rebbeinu Shalom supports us immediately, because we have a different type of audience with the Rebbeinu Shalom. It's Melech Basada, so we should all be mispalel that the Rebbeinu Shalom should come and redeem us and build a Beis Hamikdash. B'mhera v'yameinu. Amen.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.